Welcome to the session. Today I am going to discuss the erstwhile Prevention of Food Adulteration Act and rules. As we know that this PFA Act and rules have been repealed since the new act, the Food Safety and Standards Act, has come into force in the year 2006. So the PFA Act has become history, but we all know that history plays a very important role in understanding the present act. So I hope that this discussion will help us to understand the present act in a better way if we have the knowledge of the previous act, that is the PFA Act. We will discuss the genesis of central food legislation, the PFA Act, the role of central and state and UT governments in implementation of PFA Act and rules, provisions of PFA Act, penalties for offences related to food adulteration, and provisions of PFA rules. As we know that a good number of provisions of this act has been incorporated in the new act, that is Food Safety and Standards Act. So this will definitely help us to know the new act in a better way. As you all know that the foodborne diseases are very common throughout the world and it results into a lot of human suffering. So always there was a need for a legislation regulating the quality of food, the safety of food. And so it was felt that our country also needed a central food legislation, and in the year 1899 India had own food legislation, but at that time different states were having different food laws, even different food standards for same kind of food and different penalties for similar offences, and there was no uniformity in implementation of these food laws. So it was creating a barrier to the promotion of food trades between the states. Thus, the Central Advisory Committee and the Committee for Food Adulteration recommended for enactment of the central food legislation, and our Parliament passed the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act in the year 1954, which came into force in month of June of 1955. This PFA Act was primarily formulated with the objectives to protect the public from poisonous and harmful foods, to prevent sale of substandard foods, to protect interests of consumers by eliminating fraudulent practices. Now we will see what are the roles played by central government, state government and union territory government in implementation of PFA Act and rules. In our country, there is existence of a three-tier system. The uppermost level is the Government of India, that is central government. Central government actually plays the role of advisory in implementation of this act throughout the country. Central government has the power to make rules and regulation under this act. Besides making rules and regulation, central government also has many activities like it keeps liaison with the states for implementation of this act. It's coordinate with international agencies like ISO, FAO, WHO, Codex Alimentarius Commission. It organizes training program for the senior officers, food inspectors and public analysts. It also creates consumer awareness through seminars and conferences and other publication materials, and it gives the supports like technical support, financial support and administrative support to the central food laboratories. It also formulates the methods of analysis for sample. It also gives the training module for food safety and management systems. It also serves the survey cum monitoring activity for food additives and contaminants, etc. And the second level of this tier is the state or union territory government. Actually, in practice, the implementation of this act is through the state government or union territory government. In most of the states, the Directorate of Health Services actually controls its administration part of this implementation of this act, and state as government has also the power to appoint their food inspectors and public analysts, and they can also make rules and regulations under this act. And the lowermost level is the local bodies. Local bodies actually by and large in most of the states, the local bodies, local food authority, they enforce the different provisions of this act in corporation and metropolitan areas. Now we will see what are the different provisions in this act. There are total 25 sections in PFA Act. The first section is about the short title, extent and commencement. As you know, the title is the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954, and it extends to the whole of India, and it was passed in 1954 and came into force from 1955. Second section gives the definitions of various important terminologies which are used in this act. So, there are a number of definitions, but I will give you just few definitions. Like very important definition is food. Food means any article used as food or drink for human consumption other than drugs and water, and it also includes any flavoring matter or condiments. Any other articles declared by government as food. Just for example, later on government has included packaged drinking water, chewing gum, alcoholic drink etc. as food. Now, committee in this act means the Central Committee for Food Standards, and the Central Food Laboratory means the laboratory or institutes which were established or specified under this act for the purpose of analysis of food. And Food Health Authority means the Director, Medical and Health Services, or the Chief Officer in charge of health administration in state. The Local Health Authority means the officer in charge of health administration in local area. Then the very important word is adulterant. Adulterant means any material which is or could be employed for purpose of adulteration. Now we will see what kinds of adulteration included in this act. Any kind of substandard quality, substitution by cheaper substance, abstraction of any constituent of article, preparation or storage in unsanitary condition, poisonous ingredients, coloring agents and preservatives in excess of prescribed limits, and quality or purity below prescribed standards. All these kind make the food to be called as adulterated food. There are a number of examples of adulterated food, but I will give just few examples of adulterated food. Very common adulteration in our country is the stone chips in rice, addition of water or starch in milk, barley in wheat flour when the wheat flour is sold as pure wheat flour, the interest infested, whether the insect may be present as a living or dead in suji or maida, mixture of two or more edible oils as an edible oil, vanaspati added with ghee or any other substance, use of artificial sweetener beyond prescribed limit, kesari dal in tur dal, archimon seeds in mustard. You can give n number of examples for adulterated foods. Another important definition is the misbranded food. What is meant by misbranded food in this act is any food article is deemed to be misbranded if it is an imitation or substitute for another food article, if it is sold under name of another article, if true character of article is not indicated clearly on the label, if it makes false claim for article on label or otherwise, if fact of an article being damaged is concealed through coloring or polishing, or if contents are not clearly and correctly stated on package, then the food article is called as misbranded food. The section 3 deals about the Central Committee for Food Standards. It was having 54 members. They are a representative from all the states and 2 union territories, representative from different ministries like commerce, defense, food, agriculture, industries, and there are members from consumer organization, from farmer side. There were nominee from ICMR and BIS, and the Director General of Health Services was the ex officio chairman of this committee. Under this committee, there were 9 subcommittees on food laws, on food labeling, food additives and contaminants, on milk and milk products, on microbiologicals, on oil and fats, on pesticide residues, nutrition food for special dietary uses for infant, and subcommittee on methods of analysis. Section 4 gives the provision for establishment of central food laboratories. Earlier there were 4 central food laboratories, one at Calcutta, another one at Ghaziabad, third one at Pune, and last one is at Mysore. These central food laboratories are the appellate laboratories for analysis of sample received from courts or the analysis of import products sent by the custom officers or any other matter as considered necessary by central government. Section 4 gave the provisions for prohibition of imports of certain foods, the foods which are in contravention to the law, the misbranded food or the adulterated food. Section 6 empowered the custom officers to detain the certain imported foods which were deemed to be adulterated or misbranded food. Section 7 gave the provision for prohibition of manufacture, sale or storage of adulterated or misbranded foods in our country. Section 8 was about the analysis of foods. It empowers the central and state government to appoint public analyst, and the primary role of public analyst was to analyze the samples sent either by food inspector or consumer organizations or other on payment of fees. Section 9 and 10 was about the appointment and powers of food inspectors. Section 9 empowers the central government and the state government to appoint food inspectors, and section 10 was about the powers of food inspectors. The food inspectors has the power to draw samples from manufacturers' premises or the marketplace or other places. They can also prohibit the sale of adulterated food with approval of the local health authority, and they can seize the adulterated food, they can take it away or keep it in custody of vendor under some bond, and they send it for analysis. The food safety of food inspector officers, with the approval of local health authority, they can destroy the perishable product if local authority thinks that the product is a perishable in nature and that can cause harm to human, then that seized product can be destroyed after giving notice to the vendor. The food inspector also has the power to seize relevant books of accounts. They can call witness while taking samples or seizing a food article. Section 11 gives the procedures to be followed by food inspectors while taking the sample from the manufacturer's place or marketplace or other places. The food inspector has to follow some procedures. These are like the issuing of notice of his intention of sample analysis. Then the food inspector has to divide the sample into 3 parts, mark each part, seal each part properly, and they have to take the sign or thumb impression of the person from whom they are taking the sample. If the person refuses to give the sign or the thumb impression, then the food inspector has the power. They can call some witness and get their signature of the witness. Then they have to send 1 part of the sample to a public analyst and 2 parts to the local health authority. After receiving of the report, the food inspector has to produce the seized food before the magistrate within 7 days of receipt of the report. Section 12 gives the power of purchaser. Actually, any purchaser or recognized consumer organization can get the food sample analyzed by a public analyst, and they can receive the report from the public analyst. As per section 13, the report which is generated by a public analyst has to be sent to local health authority, who shall forward a copy to the vendor or the manufacturers or distributors or dealer. The court has the power to call for sample from local health authority if it is desired by the manufacturer or the distributor or the dealer for analysis at central food laboratories. Section 14 is about the issue of warranty. A manufacturer or distributor or dealer has to give a warranty in writing to the vendor for the quality of the food, and this will stand as a defense to the vendor in case of prosecution. Section 15 was about a report of food poisoning. Central government and state government may require a medical practitioner to report the case of food poisoning under their jurisdiction. Section 16 is also very important. This is about penalties. There are different degrees of penalties for different degrees of offences, starting from the offence like misbranded food or non-injurious adulterant. There will be 6 months to 3 years imprisonment and a fine of minimum ₹1,000. If adulterated food is injurious in nature, then the imprisonment can be extended to 6 years and the fine may be extended to ₹2,000. In case of death or grievous injury, the life imprisonment and minimum fine is ₹5,000. If there is subsequent offence, then the offender's name and place to be published, and in case of repeat offence, the license will be cancelled. As per 16A, there is a provision for summary trials by a first class magistrate or a metropolitan magistrate. Section 17 was about the nomination by company. A company can nominate a person to be responsible for the business of that company, and the company has to inform that to the local health authority. So that nominated person stands responsible for any kind of offence committed by that company in relation to the food adulteration. Section 18 was about the forfeiture of the property. If the food article is found to be adulterated or misbranded, if it is in contravening law, then that article can be forfeited by concerned authorities. Court can allow reprocessing of such food under supervision of officer if it is felt that the reprocessing can make the product conform to the prescribed standards. Section 19 was about a warranty, that warranty which was given by manufacturer, dealer or distributor to the vendor. That warranty stands as a defense in case of prosecution, and this warranty may be in form of cash memo or bill. As per section 20, a prosecution can be launched with written consent of authorized central or state government person except in case of warranty. Any purchaser or consumer association, they may also institute prosecution. They may make a complaint to court along with the report of the public analyst, and they can institute the prosecution. As per section 20A, power has been given to court to implead the manufacturer. If it is found that the manufacturer or distributor or dealer is also connected with that kind of offence, then the court can implead the manufacturer or distributor or dealer. Section 21 empowered the magistrate to impose enhanced penalties. Any first class magistrate or metropolitan magistrate can impose any kind of penalty except the imprisonment beyond 6 years or life imprisonment. As per section 22, there is provision for protection of action taken in good faith. That means no legal proceedings can be initiated against any government officer if he has taken the action in good faith. That means if he has done something with due care and attention and honestly, then there should be no legal proceeding against that officer. As per section 22A, it has given the power to the central government to give direction to the state governments, and the directions is to be complied with by the state governments. Section 23 empowers the central government to make rules. The central government can make rules after the consultation with the Central Committee for Food Standards and the previous publications. Central government can make rules for various purposes, like it can make rules for defining standards of quality, for imposing conditions for manufacture, distribution, sale or license, etc. It can prescribe the conditions of packaging and labeling. It can define the qualifications, powers and duties of food inspectors and public analysts. It can define the infrastructure for labs for analysis. It can restrict the use of certain ingredients. It can make rules for licensing conditions for import of foods. It can also prescribe the procedure of drawing dispatch of samples by food inspectors. It can give the methods of analysis for guidance of a public analyst. It can also make rules for providing exemption to any article from provision of act, and it can also give the rules for procedure of distraction of seized food articles. As per section 24, the powers of state governments are like this. The state governments and or union territory governments, they can also make their own rules and regulation under this act, but after the consultation with the Central Committee for Food Standards and the previous publications. And the state governments can frame the rules and regulations for defining powers, jurisdiction and duties of Food Health Authority and Local Health Authority. Can also give the definitions and the provisions for forms, fees and conditions for license for manufacture, storage, sale and distribution of food. It can define the fees for analysis and apportionment of fines, and also the rules for delegation of powers to subordinate authorities by Food Health Authority. And the last section, that is the section 25, as per this section, all the corresponding laws or acts which were in force before this act came into picture. So, all those laws and acts in states and union territories stands repealed. Now, we will see what are there in the PFA rules. The PFA rules were under the PFA Act. There are about 250 articles of food standards, and the PFA rules have also been amended many times, over 350 amendments since inception. There are many parts I have listed under this PFA rules. The first part is about the short title and commencement. The short title is Prevention of Food Adulteration Rules, and it came into force in the year 1955. The second part gives about the Central Food Laboratory. It gives the definition and functions of Central Food Laboratories. Then comes the definition and standards of quality. So, as per these rules, there are definitions and standards of quality in terms of its composition, like its fat content, protein content, moisture content, and the use of additives, preservatives, sweeteners, flavoring agent, coloring agent, maximum limit for contaminants, pesticide residues, etc. So, that is there in the third part, that is definition and standards of quality. Then fourth part is about the public analysts and food inspectors. In this part, under this rule, there are definitions of public analysts and food inspectors, their qualification, their duties, their powers and rules. And next is the sealing, fusioning and dispatch of samples. And that means how to collect the sample for analysis in a container, what should be the container used, or how it should be addressed, what should be the label should be fixed to that container, proper marking system that is there in this rule. So, first it gives the definition of the coloring matter, which coloring matter can be used, whether it is natural coloring matter or the artificial coloring matter. So, that is there in this PFA rules. Next part is about the packing and labeling of food. Packing and labeling of food gives the various instructions for packing and labeling of various food products, and what should be size of the label, whether that should be marked for veg product and non-veg product. There should be declaration from the manufacturers, there should be detail and the address of the manufacturer, date of expiry, everything is mentioned there in the PFA rule. And next is the prohibition and regulation of sale. Just for example, sale of carbide for ripening, carbide gas for ripening of fruits is prohibited under this rule. So, that is the part of the prohibition of regulation of sale. Another example is sale of kesari dal is prohibited in our country. Next is the conditions for sale and license. So, as per this rule and as per this act, no food article can be sold without license. Then comes the preservatives. So, this part gives the definition of preservatives, what is class 1 preservative, what is class 2 preservatives, how we can use class 1 preservatives and how we can use class 2 preservatives, and there is clear indication that the class 2 preservatives we cannot use more than one in a single food, and there is also instructions for the maximum level of use of these preservatives. For example, the maximum level of nitrite and nitrate in meat products should not be more than 200 ppm and 500 ppm respectively. The maximum level of sulfur dioxide and other preservatives also is mentioned in this rule. Then comes the poisonous metals. Poisonous metals, for example, lead, arsenic, mercury, copper, cadmium, like poisonous metals which can be present in food. So, there is a mention of the maximum level of these poisonous metals in different food products. Then comes the crop contamination and naturally occurring toxic substances. For example, naturally occurring toxic substance is one example is aflatoxin, which can be present in animal food or in food which is originated from animal origin or the plant origin. So, there is mention of the maximum level of this aflatoxin in different food products. The next part is about antioxidants, emulsifying agent, stabilizing agent and anti-caking agent. So, this part gives the definition of all these terminologies, what is antioxidant, what is emulsifying agent, what is stabilizing agent and what is anti-caking agent. For example, in case of antioxidants, whether it is natural antioxidants like tocopherol or ascorbic acid, whether it is chemical or synthetic antioxidants like BHA or BHT. So, there is instructions for the maximum level of use of these antioxidants in various food products. Similarly, for emulsifying and stabilizing and anti-caking agent also there is a maximum level of use of these agents is mentioned in the rules. Next is the flavoring agents and related substances. Flavoring agents that may be artificial or natural flavoring agents. Natural flavoring agents can be used but whatever we are using, whether it is natural or artificial, we have to mention it on the package or label of the food product. Next comes the carryover of food additives. If the food additives are already present in the raw material or ingredients which is used for the preparation of the food product, then there is the provision of the carryover of the food additives. Next is the insecticides and pesticides. There are number of insecticides which are in use and pesticides also which are in used for crop agriculture purpose and also for animal production, but there is a clear cut instruction that no insecticide or pesticide should be applied directly on any kind of food products. But definitely there will be some amount of insecticide or pesticide in some of the food products. So, there is instruction for the maximum level of use, presence of this maximum permissible limit for this pesticides residues in various food products. Next part is about the solvent extracted oils and edible flour. Solvent extracted oils, this part also gives the definition and the process and the maximum limit of the use of this solvent for extraction of oils and also for preparation of edible flour. The solvent which can be used as a hexane, So there is a limitation for use of hexane also, and the presence of hexane in edible flour, there is a permissible maximum level for this kind of solvent. Next comes the sequestering and buffering agents. Many acids, base or salts are used as sequestering or buffering agents in different food products. So, this rule gives the maximum level of this sequestering and buffering agents in various food products. Then comes the irradiation of food. It is very important to know that as per this PFA rule, there is a list of foods which can be used for irradiation purpose, then which can be processed by irradiation process, and the food should be irradiated only at the licensed premises which is licensed for the irradiation purpose. And there is a maximum dose for irradiation of food, and the irradiated food must be declared on the package or the label. It should be mentioned that the food is irradiated. Next comes the antibiotic and other pharmacologically active substances. For example, the antibiotics like tetracycline, oxytetracycline, which are used in seafood or fish products, there is a maximum limit of use of this antibiotic in the food products. Last is the use of food additives in food products. Different food additives may be coloring, sweetening, preservative, the binder, extender. These food additives can be used in food products, but the manufacturer or the producer should use it in maximum permissible level. In this rule, there are 4 appendix. Appendix A gives the forms for different purpose, forms for analysis, form for reporting the food analysis, and also for licenses. Different forms are there in the appendix E. In appendix B, definitions and standards of quality for various foods. In appendix C, table listing use of additives in various foods. And the last appendix is about the microbiological requirements of various foods. So, this was all about the PFA Act and PFA rules, though the PFA Act has been repealed in 2006. But I think this discussion will help us definitely to understand the new act, that is Food Safety and Standard Act 2006, as the good proportion of the provisions of PFA Act and rules have become a part of the new act, Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. Thank you.